So we're going to talk about user experience design if we had to learn it ourselves, right? So what are the 5 books that we can study that give us a broad but deep enough understanding of user experience design? The nice thing is we don't have to pay thousands of dollars for certificate programs. Maybe we don't have to spend months in a collegiate program. I know when I was starting out, I couldn't afford those programs, so I had to find some way to learn the material myself. And these books, I believe, ultimately led to me breaking into the field. Right, so we're going to cover 5 books and a few honorable mentions in the order that they most model the user experience design process. So we'll start with the strategy, right? What are we designing? We'll go into how do we organize information, the inputs that we've received from the strategy phase, and then the actual structure, or how do we build something out of that? How do we design a UI, right? First book, I would say, is Jobs to be Done by Toni Olek, or Ulwick. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, Tony. But it's a good book about getting into the user's mindset, having that mental model of I want to design something that is useful, has some sort of utility for a user. The most, I would say, popular or the anecdotal example is people or customers don't buy a 1/4-inch drill, they buy a 1/4-inch hole. Right? And if we look at, Seth Godin actually takes that a step further, which is they don't buy a 1/4-inch hole, but they buy the delight of walking into a home and seeing the art that they chose and it feeling like a home, right? So that's the kind of the mindset that we want to get into, putting ourselves in the user's shoes of why they want to buy a product, what job are they hiring your product to do, or in this case, UI. All right, the second book we're going to talk about is How to Make Sense of Any Mess by Covert. So one of the key things that we do in user experience design is information architecture. Well, what the hell is that, right? This book breaks it down into very plain terms. It's 100 pages, maybe 150 max, but each page is a couple paragraphs long, and it describes in plain English what are the principles that you need to know to be able to organize information in a way that users can understand. Actually, when I was starting user experience design, I was in a creative agency working as a project manager, and one of the folks on my project teams was an information architect. And I thought that was the dopest title. So I asked him, I was like, what the hell does that mean? And he explained it to me, and I had no idea what he was saying. So I wanted to understand what that title was, what information architecture really meant. And Abby Covert does an amazing job describing it. Okay, so the third book is about usability. And I remember reading this book and being just excited about UX because the way this is written is funny. There's a lot of dry humor. It's Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug. So the things we take for granted when using websites is there's always a logo in the top left corner. There's always a search bar in the top right corner. And why is that, right? Well, this book breaks that down. One of the coolest things that always stuck with me is this idea that when people shop at a grocery store, they fall into 3 categories. One, they could be a person that browses all the aisles and they just kind of pick up whatever they find, almost like an aimless wanderer kind of thing. Another is like people that they have a purpose, they go there with a specific thing they want to buy, and they use the aisle navigators, like, the cards at the top of every aisle to find out where they need to go. And there's always a third person which always just goes directly to a clerk and asks them where something is. And that's essentially how we use websites, right? Is we can browse content on a e-commerce page, we can use the navigation to filter content, or we could go directly to the search bar and search for something. Okay, so book 4 is Mobile First Design by Luke W. So this is a really good primer on designing for mobile, which is super important, right? But I think what's even more important about this book is that it gets you in the thought process of think about the device that your design will live on, right? Designing for mobile versus desktop, huge differences, right? Desktop, you're sitting 3 feet away maybe. Mobile, it's an arm's length away, right? You're interacting with the device differently. So it puts you in that thought process of giving the device and the constraints around where the user is using your interface, giving it time, right? Think about that. Book 5 is Designing for Emotion by Aaron Walter. So this is a really, really good book, a really good primer on visual design for user interfaces. It's only 100 pages. It's brief. It's written in very accessible language, and it trains you or gives you that mental model of how do I make an experience not just reliable, meaning not just functional, but also delightful, right? How can you add color? How can you add Easter eggs to make something more enjoyable to use? Okay, the first honorable mention is This Is Marketing by Seth Godin. So it's a marketing book, but if you find all uses of the word marketing and replace it with user experience design, you come to understand what user experience design is really about. definitely check it out. The second honorable mention is The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. If you're going to read just one book on this list, read this book. I know whenever I come back to it, I'm inspired to practice, and that's the biggest teacher of all. Thanks for your time. So we're planning more videos like this in the future, more Q&A, maybe some interview style formats, more instructional videos. Hit the subscribe button, like, share. See you next time. Hey, thanks for your time. Stay tuned for next time. Yo, thanks for your time. It was a good video. It was fun talk. See you next time on the interwebs. Yeah.